Hi everyone, welcome to From Vision to Action, launching a DEI initiative that lasts. I am Reverend Kelly Childress, and I've worked in healthcare for the past 25 years as a chaplain, process advocate, and risk manager. Much of my perspective comes from years as an activist and a healthcare worker pushing for more awareness and stronger action in DEI. I'm really happy to be here as part of the seminar's focus on building impactful futures through diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. And I'm humbled to be in such a wonderful group of people with such deep experience, wisdom, and expertise. My hope with this presentation is to help you turn ideas into action, and my goal is that you'll walk away with some practical, tangible steps that you can adapt to your own setting. I'll be focusing on sort of the organizational and business side of this, but we'll also talk about some of the historical, cultural, systemic context. So you might have heard organizations say, DEI is important, but why now? Or why the urgency? Or in these days, why should we do this at all? And the thing is that diverse teams don't just feel better to many of us, they perform better. McKinsey's research shows companies with more diverse leadership outperform less diverse peers by up to 35% in profitability. That's not just a feel-good stat, that's a competitive advantage. Beyond the numbers, DEI builds trust, fuels innovation, and helps retain great talent. When people feel valued and heard, they're more engaged, creative, and committed to the organization. DEI isn't operating in a vacuum. It's facing a coordinated wave of political and legal pressure. Republican-led states are taking action as early as early 2025. At least 15 states have passed laws limiting or banning DEI practices, and nearly half the country has considered such legislation. These laws ban things like DEI offices, mandatory trainings, and even diversity statements at colleges and public agencies. Federally, Executive Order 14151 ended all DEIA programs and mandates in federal agencies, scrubbing DEI language from websites and cutting staff. Simultaneously, Executive Order 14173 revoked Executive Order 11246 and eliminated affirmative action requirements for federal contractors, shifting toward merit-only hiring. For your organization, this means DEI is not just a moral or strategic imperative, it's also a field under legal and ideological fire. Your plan needs to be robust enough to be defensible under pressure and adaptable enough to stay relevant even when the environment changes. Before we dive in a little bit more, I just want to have a shared understanding of some of the core concepts of diversity language. So the terms are often used interchangeably, but each has a distinct meaning. Diversity is a representation of different identities and perspectives: race, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, age, ability, veteran status, socioeconomic status, culture, and more. It's not just about numbers, it's about who is present, who is visible, and whose voices are acknowledged. Equity is about ensuring fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement by removing systemic barriers and recognizing that we don't all start from the same place, and providing the support needed to succeed. Inclusion is about creating environments where individuals are welcomed, respected, supported, and empowered to fully participate. As Dr. Melissa Creary says, we can't think about inclusion without interrogating exclusion. Belonging is the emotional experience of feeling accepted, valued, and connected within a community where people can bring their authentic selves and have their contributions recognized as essential. Something about, I just want to say something quick about systemic and individual barriers. There was a Dutch accessibility advocate named Carol Dollekens, and she said people aren't disabled, the environment they live in is. So how we construct our societies, our architecture, disables people essentially. The same can be said for racism and exclusion. They're embedded not only in individual actions, but in the systems, cultures, and environments we create. When DEI is framed only through an individual lens, it definitely can trigger resistance. One example is Laura Morgan, who was a nurse with 40 years of experience, 39 years of experience, and she refused mandatory implicit bias training at her hospital and was fired. And then she wrote about it in the Wall Street Journal, and the paper published that and a sympathetic comment from a white volunteer who was shocked to be told they were systematically racist, framing DEI as personal accusation rather than systemic change. This perspective reduces racism to personal morality, allowing people to check it off their list because we all tend to see ourselves as good. So hey, if I'm good, I don't have this problem, so I don't have to pay attention to it. But systemic barriers remain intact regardless of how good we think we are. True DEI must address both redesigning systems to remove barriers and fostering the deep, raw, personal reflection that can awaken people to why systemic change is needed. So the business case for DEI is measurable. Companies in the top quartile for ethnic and cultural diversity are 36% more likely to outperform peers in profitability. Gender diverse leadership teams are 25% more likely to financially outperform. And diverse organizations are 70% more likely to capture new markets and 19% more likely to increase revenue. DEI strengthens innovation, boosts retention, and enhances reputation. Customers, clients, and communities want to work with organizations that reflect and respect them. These results come from deliberate, well-structured action. So I want to talk about 5 pillars that can form a strong foundation for DEI. We need to have leadership buy-in because without support from the top, DEI stays as a side project. I don't know, I'm sure you all have experienced this. I know I have in my work, trying to get something done, but not having the top echelon be on board with it, spending hours and hours of individual and group time trying to, move a project forward only to have it ultimately fail in the end. So that is a critical component that needs to be present. Having clear mission and goals to define success and set measurable outcomes. Having an inclusive policy review, so auditing your hiring, pay equity, promotion, grievance processes, and things like that. Engaging in continuous education and ongoing learning. This isn't about a one-off workshop or some kind of event. Even with highly motivated and engaged people, amid all the other priorities, one great training is not going to stick. People won't know sort of what direction to go in after that point. They really need a structured system around them of both connection and accountability and challenge to be able to keep moving that process forward. And the accountability part is to track, share, and adjust with the process as it goes forward. Related to that actually is the sort of flavor du jour. The people get really tired of new things coming along when it comes along and it's a big deal and then it just goes to the wayside. That's kind of what I'm talking about. The more that happens, the more you bring something new and people are just like, okay, we just have to deal with this until it goes away. Not with this. We want to set this up in a very different manner. A successful launch comes from steady, intentional steps. So you can look at it in different phases. Phase 1, assess the current state. And I've got a couple of sheets that I'm going to include in this that just can help guide you going forward. So you can do that with policy reviews, surveys, doing focus groups, gathering data. In phase 2, you can build a diverse DEI committee and include maybe community voices. In phase 3, it's important to set goals for both sort of the 90-day period and then even for the year after that. And those goals can flex, but you want to set SMART goals. In phase 4, that's just about keeping the communication channels open, communicating early and often. People appreciate transparency, especially when they're being asked to participate in something. They want to know what's going on, where are they in the process, and they feel included and more likely to continue if they get that information. And also, power dynamics matter. So if decision-making is concentrated in a narrow group, you risk reproducing inequities. When you bring people together, it's not just about who's in the room, it's also about power. Who gets to set the agenda? Whose voices carry weight? Who decides what's worth discussing? And ultimately, who makes the consequential decisions? If those answers point to a narrow group, your initiative risks replicating the inequities you're trying to address. Of course, even well-planned efforts face challenges, so we'll explore some common pitfalls to watch out for and how to avoid them. This includes a sort of checklist mentality, treating DEI just as a box to check. Another is tokenism, pointing a few visible people and calling that diversity. Engaging in one-off efforts, like a single training or a single event. And lack of accountability, no metrics, no change. As Lily Zhang notes in her book, DEI Deconstructed, oversimplifying DEI reduces complex issues spanning centuries to reductive good and bad lists, alienating the people you aim to engage. Effective training connects history to present-day realities, fosters critical thinking, and creates space for dialogue, not just compliance. Launching a DEI initiative successfully starts with a strong, intentional foundation. So the first 90 days set the tone for everything that follows. In step 1, you're listening, you're learning, you're meeting with stakeholders at every level to understand the organization's history, current culture, and challenges. And this is also the time to gather baseline data, representation metrics, pay equity, employee engagement, and turnover rates. Without a clear starting point, you can't measure progress. Step 2 is building trust and transparency. Communicate early and often about why this initiative matters, how it connects to the organization's mission, and what the process will look like. Trust is built through honest dialogue and follow-through, not just through polished statements and one and done. Step 3 is quick, visible wins, small but meaningful actions that show momentum. This could be establishing a DEI work group, creating a set of inclusive meeting norms, or improving accessibility in internal communications. These early successes signal that change is real and possible, and they help keep energy high for the longer-term work ahead. Some examples: scheduling a listening session, creating the DEI committee, creating the DEI committee charter, or reviewing your recruitment processes for bias. And once the foundation is set in that first 90 days, the first year is about building momentum and proving that DEI isn't just a temporary campaign. First, we want to deepen engagement. We move beyond a core DEI group and invite broad participation. This means creating safe spaces for dialogue, also brave spaces for dialogue. I've encountered, had experiences in the past where a group gathers together and they're discussing really difficult issues, And we're trying to create a safe space, so say marginalized people are able to speak what's real. But it also requires, especially people from overrepresented groups, dominant culture, white groups, for example, to be able to consider being brave enough to receive the truth from someone else's perspective, so that they don't break down in tears, or if they do, they say, you know, I just have this tendency to do this. This is not about me. We can move forward. I'm not trying to derail this event. But to be able to be brave and to be called out to be brave, to be able to hear others' truth. It's uncomfortable, it's painful. When you're from dominant culture and you're hearing the perspectives of people of color and from other marginalized communities, it can be very painful. But we can do it. And it requires us to be able to sit with that truth and recognize that truth and be willing to look at how we are participating in that through our actions and our inactions. So creating brave spaces as well. So in that dialogue, we want to amplify underrepresented voices and ensure that everyone understands how they can contribute. And next, we want to implement and measure, launch programs that address the key gaps, then track progress with meaningful metrics. This could be improvements in representation, reduced turnover among marginalized staff, or stronger employee engagement scores. And finally, we embed DEI into the culture. We make it part of how decisions are made, how leaders are developed, and how success is measured. This is how DEI can be woven into the fabric of our culture, moving from the project du jour to part of the organization's DNA. And with that, I leave you with some resource recommendations. I know this was a fairly quick presentation, and I look forward to more connection and more dialogue. But thank you so much for your time and attention, and I truly hope this has been helpful for your process, and I look forward to meeting you all virtually in September.